Welcome to this video on becoming your own advocate. This is part 2 of a 2-part video series, Communicating Effectively. Let's begin. What is an advocate? To advocate for someone or something is to support that person or thing. An advocate is a person who supports someone else. Being a student is challenging. In this video, you will learn how to support yourself throughout your academic career. How to be your own advocate. How to be your own advocate is a 2-part plan. The first thing is to know your rights and then to communicate effectively. That is the 1-2 punch of being your own advocate. In this video, we will focus on how to communicate effectively. So here are some common mistakes in communication. Number 1 is jumping the chain of command. Number 2 is responding with emotions. And number 3 is not documenting your communication. So let's begin by talking about what happens when you jump the chain of command. Many people believe they will get faster, better results if they go straight to the top. For example, if a student has an issue with their instructor, they will go straight to the dean of the school or even the president of the college rather than to the next person in the chain of command. When this happens, the student will be redirected to the appropriate person at the correct level in the chain. Jumping the chain makes it less likely that the student will achieve the desired goal. Basically, what's happening is that they are creating more work for everyone in the system, and they're almost sort of self-identifying themselves as a person who's being agitating and who is kind of, balking the system. And again, all that's going to happen is that you're going to be redirected to the correct or appropriate person in the chain of command. So you're kind of wasting your time, and you're also, again, sort of self-identifying as someone who is being aggressive and pushy, and that makes it less likely that you will be listened to and heard and understood. So how do you know who is next in the chain of command? Let's say you really have an issue with your instructor and you really do need to talk to the next person in command. How do you know that? Well, the best way to do it is just to go and read your syllabus. In the syllabus, it will clearly state the name and contact information for your instructor's supervisor. If you have difficulty finding this information, please ask for help from another instructor or faculty member that you trust. So the next thing that many people do, many of us, we've all done it at some point, is to respond with our emotions. All relationships have their share of frustration, even student-teacher relationships. However, when we respond with our emotions, we are less likely to be heard. When we respond with our emotions, the attention becomes directed at the negative emotions we are displaying rather than at the content of our speech. To give yourself the best chance of being heard, allow yourself time to calm down and view the situation objectively. Consider responding in writing rather than in person to give yourself more distance and objectivity. A tale of 2 students. Suppose there are 2 students who are both upset at the grade they earned on the last test. Student 1 goes up to the instructor after class and angrily demands an explanation for their grade. Then they begin to accuse the instructor of doing a bad job teaching them and begin to berate the instructor. So let's just pause and reflect what is happening here. So there's emotion on the student side, and then now the instructor is in this awkward position of also being made to feel belittled and less than. So imagine, put yourself in place of that instructor. As someone is treating you this way and angrily expressing their feelings to you, are you now more or less likely to help them? Well, chances are now you're feeling very angry and defensive. This person is attacking you, and so you feel much less likely or much less willing to help them and listen to their side of the story. We don't know how this all plays out. Hopefully the instructor would be able to calm the student down and resolve the issue. But again, you're already sort of setting yourself up for failure if you approach someone with anger. So student 2 is also very upset about their grade. They have the same amount of emotion and anger or frustration, sadness, whatever. But they go home and talk it over with their significant other. The next day, they reach out via email and ask to meet with the instructor to go over the exam. The instructor and student meet and go over each problem that the student missed. So we don't really know how this resolved, if the student ended up getting more points or if the grade was changed at all, but I think we can expect, right, because by the time they met, the instructor and the student, to go over the test, there was coolness, there's emotional calmness, the immediate emotional reaction of the anger and the frustration or the sadness over the test grade had kind of dissipated, and then it allowed room for the student to actually hear what the instructor might say about why they missed a problem. And maybe the instructor was able to say, hey, well, you know what, I will give you an opportunity to do this extra credit, or here's what you could do on the next test to improve your grade. Okay, so again, emotions, they really kind of clutter things up. They're very good and they're useful and they serve a purpose. So emotions aren't bad, but when we're trying to communicate our needs, they can get in the way of us being heard. Guidelines for responding without emotion. So definitely give yourself time. This is just a golden rule in any type of communication. Do not respond immediately. Give yourself time to calm down and process your emotions. Wait until you can deal with the situation without becoming angry or upset. Communicate in writing. If the situation is very emotionally charged, it may be difficult or impossible to communicate without having strong emotions when you are face to face. Instead, consider writing an email to your instructor. Ask a friend to read through the email before you send it to make sure it is objective and emotionally neutral. Document your communication. It was previously suggested that you communicate in writing when you are struggling to keep your emotions in check. Another benefit of communicating in writing, such as email, is that you have documentation of your communication. Most of the time, conflicts between the student and the instructor can be resolved quickly. Every once in a while, it becomes necessary to take the situation to the next level. If you have documentation of your communication, this process is much more likely to be successful. So here's another tale of two students. Suppose two students are in a class where the instructor has not been providing timely feedback. So every class period, student 1 asks the instructor when the assignments will be graded and returned to them. After 3 weeks, they finally go to their instructor supervisor to complain. They are told they should have a direct conversation with their instructor. When they say they already have had multiple conversations with the instructor denies it and promises to return the graded assignment soon. So we would like to think that everybody is honest and that everybody has other people's best interests at heart. But unfortunately, that's not always true. And if all that you've had is a in-person conversation with someone, it ends up being a he said, she said situation. And so there really isn't any documentation or proof of wrongdoing. And again, hopefully, in most cases, things can be resolved this way and it doesn't turn into an issue. However, Student 2 sends an email each week to their instructor asking when the assignment will be graded. After 3 weeks, the student forwards this correspondence to the instructor supervisor. So again, in either way, we don't know exactly how everything fell out. But in student 2's case, the supervisor actually has now some documentation. So let's pretend that instructor, this was not the first time that the complaints were filed against the instructor. The more documentation that supervisor has, the more action they can take as a supervisor. If all they have is hearsay, they don't have anything in writing or in paper, then it's really hard for them to chastise or apply any disciplinary action to the person that they are supervising. So again, if you give documentation to someone, then they have much more leverage and much more ability to advocate for you than if it's just hearsay. And again, unfortunately, it would be great if everybody was just honest and kind and loving to everyone, but that doesn't always happen. So, on the off chance that somebody lies and says they didn't have a conversation with you when they really did, by sending documentation and having these things in email in writing, then you are kind of covering yourself and making sure that you can back up what you're saying. So in conclusion, there are 3 golden rules of communication. First of all, follow the proper chain of command. Secondly, respond with objectivity and without emotion. And lastly, communicate in writing so that you have documentation of all communication. If you follow these 3 steps, you will be well on your way to being your own advocate.